Seattle woke up wrapped in a thick fog that swallowed the tops of buildings and fogged up the windows of coffee shops. The early winter chill wasn't letting up, and the damp streets reflected the red of the traffic lights like a shattered mirror. On the more forgotten side of the city, Avery pressed her lips together, trying to hold back tears. Her baby boy, Luke, just 4 months old, was restless and hungry. She cradled him with an old coat folded like a blanket, surrounded by the heavy silence of uncertainty. The tiny apartment they called home was more of a makeshift shelter, where the kitchen doubled as both bedroom and living room. At 23, Avery never imagined motherhood would come with so much silence. The silence of unpaid bills stacking up, the silence of a phone that never rang with job offers, the aching silence left behind by Luke's father, who vanished months ago. That morning, in a moment of desperation, she grabbed her phone and scrolled through her old contacts. "Sorry to bother you, but could you help me buy some formula for Luke?" She typed with trembling hands, eyes glassy with tears. Deep down, she hoped he'd feel some sense of responsibility, no matter how small. But without realizing it, she tapped the wrong number. Instead of reaching Luke's father, the message was sent to William Carter, CEO of one of the biggest tech companies on the West Coast. A message sent by mistake, and a story about to begin. 38 floors up in a glass tower, William stared out over the city, barely seeing what lay beyond the windows. His world revolved around contracts, rushed coffee meetings, and mind-boggling figures. Nothing about his day hinted that an emotional shift was on the horizon. When his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, his first instinct was to ignore it. But something made him tap it open, and when he read those simple, desperate words, something inside him shifted. Back on the cold floor, Avery braced herself for the usual silence. She wasn't expecting a reply. She never did anymore. After her parents' divorce, when she was still a kid, she'd been separated from her sister Harper, who was 5 years older, and raised by her mother. Alone, life had never cut her any slack. When her mom passed away, Avery was already 2 months pregnant. Luke's father disappeared the moment he found out. And now, holding her baby close, she could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her thin, tired shoulders. Then the screen lit up with a reply. "Are you okay?" Avery blinked, surprised. She reread it, not sure she believed it. The voice was unfamiliar but kind. "I think I sent this to the wrong number. I'm really sorry." Still, she didn't delete it. Maybe it was the way the question had been asked. No judgment, no rush. For the first time in weeks, someone had actually stopped to listen. Even if they hadn't meant to, William kept his eyes fixed on the screen. Avery. He read the name a few times, like he was trying to piece together an old puzzle. There was a strange feeling stirring, like a whisper from the past trying to break through thick walls of memory. Something about it felt familiar, and yet off. He didn't reply right away, but he couldn't bring himself to end the conversation either. That woman needed help, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he wanted to hear more. Back in her corner of the world, Avery gently rocked Luke, shielding him from the chaos outside their door. The baby slept, blissfully unaware of his mother's quiet battle, and in that moment, she felt something unexpected, a faint warmth that didn't come from the broken heater. Maybe, just maybe, that message sent by mistake wasn't a mistake at all. What she didn't know was that fate had just cracked open a door, one that led straight to forgotten secrets and lost connections. Avery lived in a constant cycle of scarcity. Every morning was a battle to stretch the last bit of milk, to find a way to pay the next bill, to keep Luke warm and fed. Each day felt like walking on broken glass, careful not to cut too deep into her soul. She tried to stay calm, to smile at her baby, to sing softly even as her hands trembled. But inside, guilt gnawed at her. How could she let her child go without? She'd tried every road she could find, applied for jobs that turned her down because she had no one to watch the baby, asked for help at churches, nonprofits, online forums, knocked on doors that shut before she could even speak. And when the last can of formula ran out, her mind went straight to Luke's father. He was gone, sure, but he was the only tie left to any kind of responsibility. It was a desperate move and, without knowing it, the beginning of something bigger. The message she thought she'd sent to Luke's dad ended up in the hands of someone completely outside her world. William, knowing nothing, read those words, and was moved by something he couldn't quite name. He didn't know who Avery was, had no idea about her past, much less her connection to Harper, his wife. But there was something strangely familiar in that quiet pain, as if her voice, through that message, had reached across time and touched something fragile inside him. Avery could barely remember her sister's face. She was only 8 when Harper went to live with their father in another city. The adults had promised visits, but they never happened. The letters stopped, birthdays came and went in silence. Their mother, filled with wounded pride, never brought Harper up again. So Avery grew up thinking she'd been forgotten, and when her mom died, there was no one left to tell. What Avery didn't know was that Harper was now married to William Carter. And at that exact moment, when he was reading Avery's message, Harper was away on yet another business trip. Their relationship had grown cold, distant, held together, more by routine than real connection. William had never seen childhood photos of his wife. Harper kept the past locked tight. They'd never talked much about family, but now, the pieces were starting to stir. William couldn't stop thinking about Avery. Her number was saved as unknown message, but he kept coming back to that conversation. He asked for her address, saying he wanted to send formula, and she gave it, hesitantly, with a tinge of shame. It was a neighborhood he only knew from headlines, and for the first time in a long while, William felt the urge to see someone not out of duty, but out of empathy. Or maybe something deeper, something he didn't yet understand. Avery wavered between gratitude and fear. Trust didn't come easy, especially after being abandoned by Luke's father, but William responded with care. He didn't push, he asked, he listened. Slowly, she opened up, told him she'd lost her mom while pregnant, that she had no one else, that she was doing her best. She didn't mention Harper. Honestly, she wouldn't even know where to start. That sister belonged to a part of her life too blurred, too painful, to dig up. And as William started to consider doing more than just sending help, the name Avery kept echoing in his mind. So far away and yet, somehow, so close. He found himself wondering, why does this story hit so hard? Why does her voice sound like one I've heard before? He didn't know that in reaching out to help this woman, he was about to uncover something long buried. Something that would turn his world and his wife's completely upside down. Avery had always been the kind of child with curious eyes and kind words, even when the world around her felt like it was falling apart. She was too young to understand what divorce meant, but old enough to feel Harper's absence, the void left behind by her sister, 5 years older. She grew up with a nameless longing, a constant sense that something was missing. Her mother did what she could, but life was hard and the silence around the past made it even harder. Avery learned to swallow her questions, to be strong, to smile even when it hurt. Over time, she slipped into teenage life on autopilot, going to school, keeping the house in order, and dreaming of a simple life where she could feel safe and loved. She didn't have much guidance. Her mother was already sick by the time she found out she was pregnant and passed away before Luke was born. The pregnancy was lonely, filled with fear and sleepless nights. The baby's father vanished the moment he saw the test results. She thought about giving up, but couldn't. Seeing that tiny heartbeat on the ultrasound changed everything. Avery carried a quiet sweetness, the kind of person who apologized just for existing. But inside her was a strength she didn't even recognize, a resilience born out of love for Luke. There was no time for sorrow. She had to figure out how to warm the milk, how to make the gas last till the end of the month, how to stretch the bus fare. Her life was a series of impossible calculations and fragile hopes. And still, She always found a way, for him. The trauma of being left behind shaped every choice she made. Avery didn't trust easily, but she wasn't bitter. She was the kind of woman who would help someone cross the street even while wiping away her own tears. She smiled at her baby while her own stomach ached from hunger. She'd learned early that breaking into tiny pieces was the price of being a single mother. But she never saw herself as a victim, just a poor girl, trying to survive, trying to give her son the kind of childhood she never had. Luke was her anchor. When he smiled, the chaos faded for a moment. Even on the coldest nights, when the chill crept into her bones, she would hum softly to him, stroking his tiny face. Avery still dreams sometimes of Harper, sometimes of a home, sometimes just of a warm bed and peace in her chest. But those dreams were buried deep, because the present demanded everything she had. There was no room to fall apart. She avoided mirrors. She didn't recognize the girl she used to be before the pregnancy. The lightness in her was gone. Her under-eye circles ran deep. Her hair was always tied back in a rush, and her clothes were borrowed, but there was dignity in every step. Even with her head down, even carrying the weight of 2 lives, she kept going. She knew no one was coming to save her, and still, every single day, she got up. A quiet act of heroism hidden in the routine. Avery was the kind of person who'd give away her last pack of diapers to a neighbor if she knew they were worse off. Pain hadn't made her selfish, it had made her generous. But fear was always there. Fear of failing Luke, of missing rent, of being forgotten like she had been by her sister. When she got William's reply, something inside her shifted. It wasn't just hope, it felt like an echo, a voice her soul somehow recognized. She never imagined a message sent by mistake could change everything, that someone on the other side of the city, from a world completely different than hers, might actually care. And she definitely didn't know that man unknowingly held the loose thread of her life. Harper. But all of that was about to come to light, and when it did, neither the past nor the present would ever be the same again. That week, Luke's formula ran out 2 days earlier than expected. Avery tried to water it down a bit more, but it didn't take long to notice he cried with more hunger and less strength. She tried to soothe him with warm cloths and constant cuddles, but every time he looked at her like he was asking for something she couldn't give, her heart cracked a little more. His crying had become the cruelest sound in her life. A reminder that, no matter how hard she tried, she was still failing. By the 3rd day, the power was cut. She used candles and her phone's flashlight to get by. With the electric stove out, she started making warm baby food by boiling water in the neighbor's microwave. Asking for help still brought her shame, but survival had begun to matter more than pride. Even so, when she passed other moms in the building, her eyes dropped to the floor. It was like she was wearing an invisible sign. Failure. The diapers were running out. She cut up old towels to use instead, washing them by hand and hanging them on the tiny balcony. The cold kept them from drying properly, and the smell began to spread through the apartment. Avery was starting to get used to the discomfort, and that scared her, not the smell, but the numbness. As if she'd stopped feeling her own pain. As if exhaustion had taken the place of hope. One of the few days, she managed to go out and try selling homemade sweets. A man on the street mocked her appearance. "You selling or begging?" he said with a crooked grin. Avery held back her tears until she turned the corner. Then she leaned against the wall of a pharmacy and broke down. That hurt more than hunger. It was the moment she truly wondered if she was strong enough for this. But when she got back home and saw Luke smile, she found one last thread of courage. The next day, Luke developed a fever. With no money for a pediatrician, she called a low-cost clinic and cried on the phone until they agreed to let her pay in for installments. She took 3 buses to get there. Sitting in the waiting room, cradling her feverish baby, she looked at the other mothers and wondered how they managed. She always felt like she was on the edge of breaking, but even so she was there, still, fighting. Her messages with William started to come more often. He asked about Luke, offered quiet help, and showed genuine curiosity. Avery kept her distance, but something about him made her let her guard down just a little. She didn't know who he was, only that he seemed different. One night, William asked if she had any family nearby. Avery hesitated, typed and deleted her reply 3 times before finally sending. "No, I don't have anyone." On the other side of the screen, William's stomach turned. He didn't know why, but those words hit like a punch to the gut. How could someone be that alone? How could someone with such a gentle voice have been left behind? He didn't mention anything to Harper about the conversation. His wife was away again. They barely saw each other these days, and as strange as it was, William felt closer to this anonymous woman than to the one he shared a bed with. What Avery didn't know was that, in the very same building where William was texting her from, someone she thought she'd never see again was just a few floors away, the sister who vanished from her life without explanation, who she imagined living in another state, in another world. The pieces were starting to move, even if neither of them realized it yet. And when that reunion came, it wouldn't come gently. It would strike like lightning out of a clear sky. That night, when Luke spiked a fever for the second time, Avery realized she couldn't keep relying on luck. She opened an old cardboard box where she kept pieces of her past photos of her mom, scribbled notebooks, and a dusty certificate from a beauty course she'd finished years ago. She'd never actually worked in the field, but seeing it again sparked something. What if she tried offering services in the neighborhood? Even if she was scared, even without recent experience, it was that, or keep sinking. The next day, she hand-wrote small flyers, eyebrow shaping and waxing, affordable prices, gentle, caring service. She taped them to light poles, the wall outside the corner market, and the laundromat entrance. By the time she was done, her hands were red from the cold, but there was a quiet glimmer in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she had done something to change her situation, and that gave her a thread of hope. The next few days were rough. No clients, no calls. The phone stayed silent, like a quiet punishment. Avery wondered if it was because of the way she wrote the ad, or if no one trusted someone like her. She felt ashamed, angry at herself for believing it might work. And every time Luke cried, the guilt returned. It felt like her failure echoed through his tiny body too. William picked up on the change in her tone. "You sound more tired today. Is everything okay?" Avery hesitated before replying. She told him about the flyers, the effort, the disappointment. He didn't offer money. He just listened. And then he said something she didn't expect. "You're brave for trying." Those words, so simple, meant more than any $100 bill. For the first time, she felt like someone really saw her. On a whim to keep going, Avery put together a small kit with the few supplies she had and started knocking on doors. Some of the older women in her building welcomed her, let her shape their eyebrows. Others ignored her completely. One woman even said, "You should be looking for a husband, not a job." Avery smiled without replying, packed up her things and left. She knew that for women like her, nothing came easy. The nights were long. After Luke fell asleep, Avery would cry quietly, but she didn't give up. She kept texting William, who sometimes asked about her childhood, about the dreams she used to have. She didn't share much, but little by little, she started to trust him. It felt strange to trust someone she'd never met, but he seemed to understand. He didn't judge, and for someone used to being constantly judged, that was a rare kind of relief. Meanwhile, William had started quietly looking into Avery's background. He still didn't know why her story hit him so hard, but there was something about her voice, her details, that stayed with him. One sentence, "I had a sister once, but life pulled us apart," stuck in his mind. He couldn't explain it, but it gave him chills. And suddenly, a foggy memory surfaced. Harper, as a teenager, once mentioning a lost sister. A forgotten wave rising back to the surface. Avery, in her own way, was feeling something shift too. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It felt like a reconnection to a part of herself that had gone numb. The part that still believed in people, that still hoped something good could happen. And even though she didn't know how, she sensed change was coming. Not from luck, not from some miracle, but maybe, just maybe, because, for the first time in a long time, she was finally being seen. William had started including Avery in his daily routine even if she didn't know it. Every morning, before any meetings, he'd scroll through their old messages. Sometimes he'd send a simple question, "How's Luke today? Did you get any sleep?" She replied without sugarcoating anything, with an almost raw honesty. There was no charm, no pretense, just a woman surviving. And maybe that's what held him so tightly, the truth she carried in her voice, even if he'd never heard it. One night, he sent her a message that made her stop in her tracks. "You know, you've got a rare kind of courage, Avery. Most people wouldn't do what you're doing." She looked at Luke sleeping and felt her chest tighten. No one had ever told her that. She'd always been called weak, too dreamy, too naive. But those words stirred something deep inside her, like someone had found the right key to a place she didn't even know was still there. They started talking about childhood. Avery shared her love for strawberry ice cream, nights spent listening to music with her mom, and scattered memories of a sister who used to braid her hair. William felt a growing discomfort. Every detail echoed something buried deep within his marriage to Harper. But he didn't want to dig too deep. Not yet. It was like he knew pulling that thread could unravel everything. Meanwhile, Harper was growing more distant. Her business trips stretched longer. Their conversations had turned robotic. She avoided anything related to childhood, and William had never pushed. But now, her silence started to feel suspicious. One evening, he stepped into Harper's room and opened an old keepsake box. They were old photos, scraps of paper, handwritten notes, and among them, a child's drawing signed, Avery, age 7. His heart skipped. Across town, Avery had been thinking of Harper. Sometimes, she saw her face in dreams, always with her back turned, always walking away. When she was little, she used to ask her mom why Harper never came back. She never got a clear answer. That pain had hardened into a kind of forced forgetting. But now, talking to William, something inside was waking up again. For the first time in years, she felt a real urge to find her. She just didn't know how, or if she'd even be welcome. Luke, though still so small, seemed to sense the shift in the air. He slept better, smiled more. Avery believed he could feel her calm, the strange sense that something good was drawing near. William sent her a package with diapers, formula, and a soft blue blanket. She cried when she opened it. "You didn't have to do this," she messaged. "I wanted to," he replied. And in that moment, she understood that trust wasn't just a pretty word, it was a daily choice. Between conversations, William started putting the pieces together. Harper had a missing sister. Could Avery be that sister? Was that even possible? He hesitated to say anything. What if he was wrong? But something inside him screamed that this wasn't just coincidence. He knew he had to see Avery face to face. He needed to hear her story with his own eyes, and maybe confirm what he already feared, that his wife and this woman were connected by something much bigger than him. Avery accepted his invitation nervously. William said he wanted to meet her, take her and Luke somewhere more comfortable, just talk. She hesitated, but the way he spoke, so careful, so respectful, touched something deep. Holding Luke in her arms, heart pounding, she said yes. She didn't know what to expect. All she knew was that this man was changing everything without making any promises, and that somehow he was tied to something she lost a long time ago. Dinner was set for a Friday evening. William arranged for a car to pick up Avery and Luke, and he made sure everything was warm and low-key, no flash, no pressure. When the apartment door opened and she stepped in with the baby in her arms, something twisted in his chest. It felt like some part of him recognized her presence. Avery was nervous, but tried to smile. William, meanwhile, was trying to understand why his heart was racing like that. During dinner, he asked gentle questions about her childhood, the school she went to, her mother's name. Avery answered calmly, a little wary. But when she talked about Harper, her sister, who vanished, who she hadn't seen since she was 8, there was a light in her eyes. I looked for her, you know, she said. After my mom died, I had nowhere left to go. But I never found her. William said nothing. He swallowed hard, and in that instant, his world began to crack. Avery pulled a photo from her wallet. It was the only old picture she had of the two of them together. She showed it with tenderness, saying she kept it like a treasure. William nearly dropped his glass. He recognized the child's face beside young Avery. It was Harper, his wife. Clear as day, his mind snapped into focus. Like every path he'd walked suddenly made sense and yet completely fell apart. He stood up slowly. He needed air. Are you okay? Avery asked, confused by the sudden shift. William nodded, barely able to breathe. He walked into the next room, pulled out an old box where he kept Harper's photos. When he returned, he held one out. Is this your sister? Avery looked and froze. She covered her mouth. It was her. Older? Yes. But definitely her. Oh my God. She whispered. You know Harper. William nodded, eyes glassy. Avery, Harper is my wife. The silence that followed was brutal. Time seemed to stop. Avery felt the floor vanish beneath her. The room spun, and everything she thought she knew was suddenly appended. You're my brother-in-law, she said, barely breathing. William sat back down, speechless. And for a long, heavy minute, they just stared at each other, crushed by the weight of the truth. The pain that came next was strange. It wasn't anger, it was something deeper, older, a mix of grief, shock, and a kind of hope that didn't yet know where to land. Avery started crying uncontrollably. Did she know I was out there? Why didn't she ever try to find me? William didn't have an answer. The guilt began to shift. He'd never asked Harper about her past, and maybe, just maybe, that made him part of the distance too. Later that night, he called Harper. She was at a conference in Chicago. William didn't ease into it. Do you have a sister named Avery? Silence, then a heavy breath. Why are you asking me that now? William's voice rose. Because I just had dinner with her. Because she's here. Because you never told me. Harper hung up without saying a word. And in that moment, William knew everything had changed. Avery didn't sleep that night. Luke lay peacefully beside her, unaware of the emotional earthquake unraveling around them. She stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together memories, questions, longing. She knew she had to find Harper. She needed answers, but she was scared, too, because a reunion could heal or hurt even more. Still, no matter what came next, she knew there was no turning back. The truth was out, and now it had to be faced. Avery woke with heavy eyes and a restless soul. It all felt like a dream. But Luke in the crib was the reminder that life marched on. She spent the morning watching her son's every move, trying to process the avalanche from the day before. Knowing that Harper was so close and yet still so far was cruel. But there was something stronger than the pain, the need to understand. And this time, she wasn't running. William called early. He said Harper would be back in 2 days and that he wanted them to talk. Only if you're ready, he added. Avery stayed quiet for a moment, then said, I want to, but I'm scared. Scared of being rejected again, of finding out that her sister had simply chosen to forget her. You have every right to feel that, William said. But you also have the right to be heard. Those words struck deep. Over the next 2 days, Avery rearranged her tiny apartment, had a friend from the building cut her hair, and even cleaned Luke's stroller with careful, symbolic intention. She wanted to feel ready inside and out. She cried alone, more than once. She reread old letters from her mother, tucked away in a hidden box. In one of them, a line stood out. Don't forget your sister. Even far away, she's part of who you are. It felt like a sign. William, meanwhile, began to look at Harper differently. When she came back from her trip, she found him quiet, more serious than usual. He didn't mention Avery right away. He wanted to give Harper a chance to be honest, but she kept up her usual posture, guarded, distant, cold. It was like a piece of her was always bracing for something, and now William understood why. When he finally brought it up, Harper froze. She wasn't supposed to come back. The words hit like a punch to the gut. William couldn't breathe. You knew where she was all this time. Harper looked away. I knew, sort of, but I thought it was better not to. The past hurt too much. I thought she'd be better off without me. William didn't reply. He understood that it wasn't just selfishness, it was fear. And he saw that clearly now, on the day of the reunion. Avery arrived early, Luke in her arms, wearing a simple clean dress, her face marked with nerves. William greeted her with a gentle hug. You look beautiful, Avery, she smiled shyly. When Harper walked into the room, time stopped. The two of them locked eyes, no words. Just a silence packed with everything that had gone unsaid for years. Luke broke the moment with a soft whimper. Avery rocked him, eyes never leaving her. Sister, his name is Luke, your nephew. Harper stepped closer, hands trembling. He has our mother's eyes. Her voice was soft, almost cracking. And then for the first time in over a decade they hugged, awkward at first, then deep. Wet with old tears, heavy with truths that had never been spoken. In that embrace, Avery realized she was changing. She wasn't the forgotten girl anymore, or the desperate mother. She was strong. She had faced abandonment, hunger, guilt, and now she was facing her past head-on. Harper, too, understood something. Time doesn't erase blood. Silence can wound just as deeply. And reconnection wasn't about going back to what once was, it was about building something new with what remained. In the days following the reunion, Avery and Harper started talking more often. There was still hesitation, hidden hurt, but the ice had been broken. Luke had become a bridge between them. Harper bought a new crib, clothes, even offered to pay for a nanny. Avery turned down some of the help, but she accepted the affection, which was far more rare. William watched it all carefully. He knew that when you open a door to the past, you don't always get to choose what comes through. It was Harper who suggested they search through their mother's old apartment. Maybe we'll find photos, letters, something to help us understand what really happened. Avery agreed. They went together. The place was empty, dusty, but still carried the echo of home. In one of the boxes at the back of the closet, they found a worn envelope containing a letter that had never been sent. It was addressed to Harper, signed by their mother. The letter explained why they were separated. Avery's mom had tried to keep in touch, but their father had blocked everything, changed phone numbers, cut all contact. She had suffered deeply but never told the full truth, hoping to spare the girls more pain. Avery cried softly as she read. When Harper finished, she sank to the floor and broke down. Oh my God, I thought she didn't want me anymore. The ground beneath their story shifted, but the real shock came after. Inside the same envelope was a document folded into quarters, an informal will, handwritten. Their mother left everything she had, little but meaningful, in the names of Avery and Luke Carter. Harper froze when she read it. She knew. My husband's name, Avery? Puzzled, replied. I named Luke after a movie character. Later, when William heard this, he was stunned. Did you say Luke Carter? Avery nodded. I thought it sounded strong. Beautiful. He rubbed his face in disbelief. Avery, my full name is William Lucas Carter. Avery stared at him. What? Her breath caught in her chest. The name of her son was, unknowingly, a tribute to the man who had changed her life and who, in some impossible way, had already been written into her story before they even met. The silence that followed was thick. William stepped outside for air. How could this be? Had her mother known? Had Harper None of it made sense, and yet all of it did. It was as if every step they'd taken had been drawn in invisible lines that were only now becoming clear. The baby's name wasn't just coincidence. It was a thread, a symbol of everything lost and found. Harper, moved by the coincidence, had an unexpected reaction. For the first time in years, she let herself feel. She cried in her sister's arms, apologized, admitted that she'd been afraid to reach out, afraid of being rejected for moving on. I looked for you too late, and I felt ashamed for having a good life while you were suffering. Avery held her tightly. All we have is now, Harper. And it's still enough to make things right. William walked back into the room, watching the two of them. Luke was fast asleep, peaceful, bearing the name that now tied them all together. The twist of fate was complete. Nothing was as it had been, but maybe, just maybe, it was exactly how it was always meant to be. Life doesn't ask permission to turn itself inside out. And sometimes, only in the chaos, does the truth finally find room to bloom. The silence between the three figures in the room was thick. Luke slept in Avery's arms, unaware of the weight pressing down on the moment. Harper sat on the couch, her eyes still brimming with tears. William remained standing, arms crossed, staring at the floor. The name, the letter, the buried past, all of it now stacked between them like a mountain impossible to ignore. It was time to say the things that had been stuck in their throats for years. "Why didn't you ever look for me?" Avery finally asked, her voice low but steady. Harper took a deep breath. "Because I was ashamed. Because I was angry at our mom, and at myself." She was shaking. "I thought if I pretended you didn't exist, the pain would go away." Avery clutched Luke a little closer. "But I did exist, Harper. Every day. Hungry, cold, missing you. Didn't you ever wonder?" William tried to step in, but Avery raised a hand. "Let me talk. I spent years believing I wasn't good enough to be remembered. That I didn't deserve my sister's love." Harper broke into tears. "You deserved everything. I just didn't know how to face what I'd lost. This wasn't about revenge, it was about release." The words, though painful, were necessary to clear the ground beneath them. Then William spoke. "You were both victims of the same broken story? And in a way, so was I. I built a life with Harper, but I never asked to see who she was before she met me." He turned to Harper. "You hid a vital part of yourself, and now it affects all of us." Harper nodded, no longer defending herself. For the first time, she looked truly vulnerable. "I didn't want to lose you," William replied without hesitation. "But you lost yourself." Avery stood and gently placed Luke into Harper's arms. "He's yours too now. He's our chance to do this differently." Harper held him like she was holding a miracle. The baby stirred, turned his tiny face, and fell back asleep. She smiled through tears. "He's beautiful. He looks like you." Avery gave a soft smile. "I just hope he has better luck in life than we did at the start." It was the beginning of a new story. William looked at both of them. "I think we have choices to make. One of them is whether we keep pretending this never happened, or whether we start rebuilding brick by brick." Harper reached for her sister's hand. "I want to rebuild." Avery paused a moment, then squeezed back. "So do I." It was simple. It was real. And in that small gesture, pain began to transform into something else, the start of something new. That night, no one went to bed early. They talked about the past, the letters, their fractured childhood. Harper apologized again and again. William mostly listened. Avery spoke about their mother, the pregnancy, the loneliness, the cold nights. Harper cried as if purging years of silence. And when the morning light crept in, for the first time, none of the three carried the weight alone. The confrontation had happened and it hadn't destroyed them, it had cleared the way. Because sometimes, the only way forward is through the pain, not around it. And in that room, filled with memory, regret, and old love, three people made a choice not to run anymore, to build bridges, even with bruised hands. And this time, none of them would have to walk alone. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Avery had ever known. For the first time in a long time, she felt light when she woke up. The kitchen was still modest, the apartment still small, but now there were visits, conversations, life around her. Harper came by on weekends, bringing diapers, books, and food. Not out of obligation, but as someone truly trying to be part of what she once left behind. Avery returned to work, offering small beauty services, this time with clients preferred by Harper's friends. You've got talent, Avery. This isn't a favor. It's recognition. Avery heard those words with tears in her eyes. She was learning how to let herself receive without guilt. The struggle wasn't over, but now, she no longer felt like she was fighting alone. And that changed everything. William had changed too. He started spending less time at the office, trading meetings for afternoons with Luke and Harper. He began to listen more, judge less. His relationship with Harper, once cold, took on new shades. For the first time, he saw who she really was and he accepted her. With Avery, the bond remained strong, now rooted in trust, mutual respect, and genuine affection. There was quiet admiration and deep gratitude. Harper began therapy. She recognized the need to look inward to face the traumas that had frozen parts of her. In one session, she told her therapist, "For a long time, I thought pretending to be strong was the way forward. Now I see, accepting my vulnerability is what actually makes me strong." That new awareness brought her closer to Avery, not out of guilt, but with honesty. Luke was at the center of it all. He was growing up healthy, loved, surrounded by smiles and care. It was as if, around that little boy, the cracks of the past were slowly being sealed with hope. Every day, Avery spoke to him about courage, kindness, and the future. "You're the beginning of so many things, my love," she'd whisper, while rocking him, and in Luke's eyes, there was a calm that no storm could erase. Avery began taking night classes. She wanted to specialize in cosmetology. William paid for her first semester, and she accepted not as charity, but as support. "You believed in me before you knew who I was. Now it's my turn to believe in myself too." Every class was a step toward the future. Twice a week, Harper watched Luke and made sure to spoil him with stories, toys, and affection. The girl once dismissed as just a poor kid had become a woman who inspired other mothers in the building. She began mentoring neighbors, helped organize a fundraiser for a woman who lost everything in a fire. "If I climbed out of the hole, so can others," she said. Pain had shaped her, but it didn't define her. The past was still there, but it no longer ruled her. Avery had found her voice. And more than anything, she had reclaimed her story. The little girl who was forgotten, left behind, was now remembered with love. Her family was far from perfect, but it was real, present, and rebuilt with every honest gesture. Avery knew not everything would have answers, but she also knew that some things didn't need to hurt anymore to make sense, and that was freedom. The following spring, Avery graduated from a small technical course in aesthetics. It was a simple ceremony held at the community center, but when her name was called, the applause was genuine. Harper held Luke in her arms while William filmed everything on his phone. "You did it," he whispered, pride shining in his eyes. Avery smiled, overwhelmed. For a moment, she felt the little girl inside her being embraced by the woman she had become. Time hadn't healed everything, but it had healed what mattered most. Harper and Avery still stumbled over painful memories, over awkward silences. But there was conversation now. There was presence, and forgiveness, though still under construction, could be seen in the little things. In the coffee Harper brought every morning, in the notes Avery left on the fridge. William remained the bridge and, often, the mirror of everything that united and divided them. One afternoon, while playing with Luke at the park, Avery heard a boy ask her son, "Is that your dad?" Luke pointed to William and answered, "No, he's my friend. But he takes care of us too." William, hearing this from a distance, smiled. In that moment, he understood. blood ties can be a coincidence. But love is a choice, and he had chosen for them. For the story, he never meant to be part of but helped rebuild. Avery wrote a letter to her mother, even with no place to send it. You tried. Mom, I know you did. I'm trying too, and now, we're okay. Folded into 4 parts, the letter was placed in the same envelope where she had found the will. Beside it, a new photo. Her, Harper, and Luke lying in the grass, smiling like life had shown up just in time. Like the clock had been kind enough to offer a second chance. A month later, Harper invited Avery to move in with her until she finished college. The house was spacious, the room right next to Luke's. Avery hesitated but said yes. Not because she needed to, but because she allowed herself. It was the final step in a silent forgiveness, a chance, for the first time in years, to have coffee with her sister every morning, to laugh for no reason, to remember without pain, to plan a future together. On the day they packed the boxes, Avery found the first message she had ever sent to William. She read it aloud and laughed. Do you remember this? William nodded. That message changed my life. Avery looked at him and said, actually, it started giving mine back. That's when she realized. Sometimes, mistakes are the beginning of the most beautiful things in our story. And even without a ring on her finger, a real estate empire, or a tailored suit, Avery had something most millionaires would never have: peace. She built a new life out of small bricks made of pain, empathy, and resilience. Now, she knew that all of it, the hunger, the absence, the fear, had served a greater purpose. And even though she never meant to send that message to the wrong number, she understood now. Fate always finds us, even through the most unexpected paths. What would you have done in his place? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories like this one.